the enchanted sailor of Beverly Hills. The golden sun of California began to dip below the horizon, casting long and elegant shadows across the sprawling estate of the Clampett family. Inside the mansion, which always felt a little too large and a little too fancy for its inhabitants, Granny was pacing the floor of the parlor with a restless energy that could have powered a small city. Her face was a map of concern, every wrinkle etched with the worry of a grandmother whose only granddaughter was out in the big, unpredictable world of Beverly Hills. She paused by the window, peering out into the twilight as if she could pull Ellie Mae back home by the sheer force of her will. Jed Clampett, a man of infinite patience and steady nerves, sat nearby, watching her with a calm expression that contrasted sharply with her agitation. Granny turned to him, her voice rising in a familiar pitch of anxiety. She told Jed that she wanted to see if Ellie was home yet, her heart heavy with the weight of waiting. Jed, ever the voice of reason, leaned back and told her to stop worrying about Ellie. He reminded her that they had discussed this before, but Granny was not so easily pacified. She reminded him that his only daughter was out with a sailor. Jed nodded, acknowledging that he knew that fact very well. However, Granny was not finished. She added with a sharp edge to her voice that the young man was not only a sailor, but he was also a frogman. Jed remained unmoved, stating that he knew that too. He gently encouraged Granny to go on to bed, assuring her that Ellie could take care of herself. Meanwhile, on the grand porch of the mansion, the moonlight began to dance on the stone steps. Ellie Mae stood there with Mark Templeton, a handsome young man in a crisp naval uniform. The air was filled with the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine, and for a moment, the world felt quiet and perfect. Ellie Mae looked at Mark and told him that she sure did thank him for a wonderful evening. Mark, reluctant to let the night end, asked if they could just sit there and talk for a while. Ellie Mae glanced toward the house and noticed the light on in Granny's room. She reckoned that Granny was waiting up for her, a thought that brought a small, sympathetic smile to her lips. Mark sighed, a touch of frustration clouding his handsome features. He expressed his wish that Granny would stop worrying about him being a frogman. It really seemed to upset her, and he could not quite understand why. Ellie Mae explained that she reckoned Granny figured it was kind of dangerous, being underwater so much. Mark laughed softly and assured her that it was not all that dangerous. To him, it was a fascinating new frontier to the unexplored depths of the ocean. He told her that he hoped to show it to her soon, and Ellie Mae, always an adventurer at heart, replied that she would love to see it. She then asked if he supposed they could get Granny down there. Mark chuckled, doubting it very much because she was awful scared of water. Inside the parlor, the atmosphere took a dramatic turn. Granny had moved to the television set, her eyes glued to the flickering black and white screen. Jethro was sitting nearby, equally enthralled. Suddenly, Granny let out a cry of alarm, claiming that the monster had the girl in the parlor. She shouted for the fiend to let go of her granddaughter. Ellie Mae walked in just then, confused by the commotion, and told Granny to be quiet. Jed asked what was going on, and Jethro, with a wide grin, explained that he was watching the late monster movie. He asked if they had ever seen the creature from the slimy ooze. Granny, convinced that fiction was reality, pointed at the screen and told Jed that his cousin Ellie was out with it. She watched in horror as a rascal on the screen grabbed a beautiful blonde girl. She described the monster's dilemma, wondering whether he should take the girl to his world at the bottom of the swamp or live in her world on a Park Avenue penthouse. She cried out to the general, watching as the creature dragged the girl down into the slimy ooze. Jethro, on the other hand, was delighted, calling the monster a dandy. Jed could only shake his head at his family, remarking that they were all hooked on freaks. As the movie ended, Granny prepared herself for the next one, which Jethro announced as the late monster movie about a lizard that ate Philadelphia. Granny was half worried out of her mind and felt the need to talk to someone. She turned to the general, expressing her deep concern that Ellie was out with a naval frogman. In her mind, the description was literal. She believed that from the navel down, he was a frog. Jethro tried to distract her by pointing out a vampire Batman, a green zombie, a werewolf, and a mad scientist on the screen, claiming they were all good guys. Granny felt hopeless. When Ellie Mae approached her, Granny immediately asked where the frogman was and if he had tried to take her to a swamp. Ellie Mae denied it, but Granny insisted she run to the kitchen, cut a potato in two, rub herself with it, and then bury it. When Ellie Mae asked why, Granny explained it was so she would not get warts. Jed finally stepped in, telling Granny to leave the girl alone and go to bed. Granny argued that she did not want Ellie to get warts, but Jed insisted he wanted her to get some sleep, and Granny too. He asked Ellie if she had a nice evening, and she replied that it was fine and dandy, mentioning that she and Mark were going on a picnic tomorrow. The next morning, the household was a whirlwind of activity. Jethro was still mesmerized by the television, watching a giant pussycat, while Granny was busy checking weather signs. She was convinced it might rain, which would ruin the picnic. She muttered to herself that at least the young couple would not be bothered by ants, because the frogman would eat them. When she saw Mark hanging around, she told him to go on home, or she would get the giant pussycat to eat him. To her disappointment, the weather signs indicated it was going to be a nice day. Seeking a solution to what she perceived as a biological crisis, Granny headed to the bank to speak with Jane Hathaway. She considered Miss Jane to be the smartest person she knew. Miss Jane, wearing a raincoat and carrying an umbrella despite the clear sky, was flattered. Granny explained her bad dreams about Ellie marrying a frog that was part man and part aquatic centaur. Miss Jane tried to clarify the mythology, mentioning centaurs, satyrs, and the god Pan, who was goat from the waist down. Granny was horrified and asked for the telephone number of Zeus, thinking he was a doctor who could help. Miss Jane explained that Zeus only existed in Greek mythology on Mount Olympus. Granny, undeterred, decided that if the ancient mountain doctors were unavailable, she would take matters into her own hands as a mountain doctor herself. She decided to make a potion to cure the frogman. She returned home and found Ellie Mae in the kitchen, preparing food for the picnic. Ellie Mae was making spaghetti, meatballs, and something she called garlic donuts. Jed, tasting the food, realized it was quite heavy and encouraged Ellie Mae to go get dressed while he finished packing the basket. In a fit of scientific ambition, Granny took over the kitchen to create her anti-frog serum, using secret powders and herbs. Meanwhile, Jethro, driven by hunger, managed to find the basket of Ellie Mae's cooking. Jed, knowing the strength of Ellie's culinary creations, told Jethro to bury them. Instead, Jethro ate the entire contents. Realizing they needed real food for the picnic, Jed sent Jethro to Big Mama Nacarelli's to buy a fresh supply of Italian food. When Mark arrived, Granny was ready with her green potion. She insisted he drink it, claiming his eyes looked bloodshot from being underwater. Mark, wanting to please the family, drank the bitter liquid and immediately felt a tingle in his feet and legs. Due to a series of comedic misunderstandings involving Jethro eating the second batch of food and Ellie Mae finding an empty basket, the picnic plans were shifted to the restaurant. As the day progressed, Granny's confusion grew. She found a frog in the garden and, in her frantic state, became convinced that her potion had worked the wrong way, turning Mark entirely into a frog. She began to treat the little amphibian with great care, giving it tonic and talking to it. Miss Jane later arrived and told Granny the classic story of the beautiful maiden who kissed a frog to turn him back into a prince. Granny rushed to Ellie Mae, pleading with her to kiss the frog she had found in the cage. She told Ellie that if she ever wanted to see Mark again, she had to perform this task. Ellie Mae, though confused, agreed to do it for Granny's sake. Just as she was about to kiss the frog, Mark walked through the door, looking perfectly human and handsome. Granny, seeing Mark standing there at the exact moment of the intended kiss, was overjoyed. She was convinced that the magic had worked and that she had witnessed a miracle. The family stood together, the misunderstanding finally settling into a warm, humorous memory, proving once again that in the world of the Clampets, love and a little bit of mountain magic could solve almost any problem.